Hi everyone, my name's Anita Caras and I head up the Insights team at Verizon Media. And I'm thrilled to be here today to close out this first of IAB Europe's Interact conferences that is virtual, powered by digital today. What I was planning on taking you through today was an assessment of how future-ready businesses are, based on proprietary research that Verizon ran in conjunction with Longitude, which is a Financial Times company, at the beginning of the year. As you can see from the stats on the screen, this was a large B2B study interviewing over 1,000 business leaders responsible for leading large companies with annual revenues of $300 million or more. They spanned a variety of sectors and were on a global scale. The way we evaluated the future readiness of businesses was by analysing their responses to 4 key areas. The first of which was technology adoption. This is exploring which emerging technologies organisations are adopting and how successful they have been in rolling them out. The second is skills and behaviours, identifying the skills firms expect to need in the future and what steps they are taking now to onboard them. Thirdly, we have leadership and cultural change. This is assessing how leaders are adapting their business strategies for the future success of their companies and the steps they are taking to create the right culture for continued evolution of that business. Finally, we have ways of working. How are organisations adopting their structures to improve agility and make the most of the new technologies we have today, such as artificial intelligence and higher levels of automation? By focusing on these areas, we are able to get a perspective on the business priorities, the degree to which they are investing in their workforce through training, development, and installing the right technology, the cultural changes they are making, and a view on whether some industries are more prepared than others. But then, in an instant, the world changed. COVID-19 emerged as a global pandemic which transformed our lives both professionally and personally. We heard about some of the economic impact from Daniel earlier today, so I'm not going to use this time to talk through all of the stats and facts behind these statements on the screen, but it is suffice to say that I have been working in research for over 25 years and I have never witnessed a time like this, where consumer behaviour and business response has shifted and continues to evolve so quickly. This obviously, from a practitioner's perspective, is hugely fascinating, but it's also challenging as what is true today may have shifted again tomorrow, and hence the need for constant analysis and interpretation. We have therefore gone back into field with the Future of Work study, with the ambition of publishing the results late next month. So today I'm going to focus on the observations I have witnessed through our own data, sharing some early indications from this body of work and reinforcing some of the comments that surfaced earlier today. We will share the full report of this work with event attendees once it's published. So this is really a sneak peek of what is to come. What this pandemic has created is a full stop, reset and rethink for both consumers and businesses alike, with new practices and priorities emerging as we reimagine what businesses can be in the post-COVID world. From a work perspective, it was goodbye to open plan offices and hello to home working, with 1/3 of us across Europe now working from home, and those that have returned to work are facing staggered work times, wearing of masks, temperature checks and plexiglass walls to keep those social distancing measures in place. As we adjusted to home isolation, technology has become our sole platform for communication, entertainment and collaboration. We at Verizon saw a huge surges in our data usage, particularly in collaboration tools and the virtual private network spaces that are required for home working. This surge in demand has been reflected by many of our telecommunication partners across Europe. In the UK, BT reports a 35 to 60% increase in daytime weekday fixed band broadband usage. Telefonica reports 40% more bandwidth in Spain. In Italy, Telecom Italia has experienced a traffic increase to 63%, whilst in France, Orange reports voice traffic has doubled. But what is most interesting to us is which of these behaviours and new working practices will stick. Let's take home working as an example. In a recent GWI study in the US and UK, we can see that claimed readiness for home working rises hugely by sector. The majority of us sit within the advertising and marketing sector, which is seen as being the most equipped for this change. But there are significant variances when we see the education, healthcare and retail, and huge improvements that need to be made to make home working a reality. And of those that have been able to work from home, the majority of us are seeing and enjoying the benefits, including increased flexibility in our working hours. In our analysis of business usage tools, we can see that the lack of commute has meant we've been able to start work earlier in the day, which also has been counteracted by us logging off earlier in the evening. And hence, that has shifted our working behaviours whilst we're at home, enabling us to pursue hobbies and passions, reducing stress and maintain productivity as we mould our working lives with our daily lives. We see these benefits reflected in the GW work and their behaviour study, with flexibility, sleeping habits all becoming more positive, as well as being able to focus and having less distractions. But the reality is that businesses weren't as prepared as employees for this change and are playing catch up. According to Gartner, pre-pandemic, only 10% of businesses with revenues of $1 billion or more are used to having the majority of their workforce regularly working from home. And 40% of businesses have established work from home practices. This has been steadily on the rise because of the fact that we have seen productivity, reduced costs, and greater employee satisfaction. However, this recent social upheaval caused by the virus suddenly thrust remote work into widespread adoption. For the remaining 50% of businesses, they found themselves short, unprepared for this seismic shift in working practices, having to buy in and test technology on the fly to maintain and secure access to corporate data, meet communication and collaboration needs, but also provide a sense of community whilst people are working remotely. As an employee, the speed and way our employers have responded to the pandemic has permanently transformed the way that we look at companies that we work for and how we view our working environments. Gaining favour is critical, as in our Future of Work study, we saw that the two leading internal barriers that businesses see for preventing them from achieving their longer-term strategic goals are, number one, implementing the new technologies required, and secondly, attracting and retaining the right talent. In our view, there are 4 waves for remote working, and right now we're in the middle of a COVID-19 induced third wave. The COVID-19 crisis has hastened organisations' ambitions to embrace remote working as the new normal. During the last recession, it was largely about saving money. Organisational leaders, desperate to shed costs, found that they could do so with less real estate. Despite some adoption, this consideration still stands, though, because recent occupancy studies have shown just how inefficient our workspace are currently being used. Employees around the globe are not at their desk for 50 to 60% of the time. Think of the waste of money when you think about lighting, heating, and security. Then we've moved to second waves of adoption. Over the past few years, the primary driver for working from home programs has been the attraction and attention of talent, and the possibility of recruiting from further afield to increase the talent pool from which you're searching within. As I said, we're currently on that third phase of adoption, the global home working experiment, if you will, forced on businesses due to the government strategies for tackling the COVID-19 virus. So what's next for home working? Well, the longer that people are required to work at home, the greater the adoption will be when the dust settles. We believe, based on historical trends, that those who were working from home remotely before the pandemic will actually want to increase their frequency of working from home after they are allowed to return back to the office. And for those where working from home or remotely was new to them during the pandemic, we believe there'll be a significant upswing in adoption. Our best estimate is that we'll go from that 10% that we saw before to a 25 to 30% of the workforce working from home on multiple days a week by the end of 2021. But in order to support this increased demand and enter that fourth wave of remote working, organisations will have to have a distinct set of challenges that they both face and overcome. One of the most important of which is technology. These flexible work arrangements will be highly reliant on swift and smooth adoption of technology to support and sustain the productivity in this decentralised business model. Underlying this wave will be the emerging deployment across key industries of a set of new technologies that are now taking shape, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, spatial sensing, and the monitoring and mapping. For example, remote workers will need access to experts. Call centre operators will need an environment where the security and data privacy issues are well addressed. And teachers will need a way to monitor tests and exams. It's critical to start with the user need and the user experience that you want to create. Then source the technologies you require to support that user-friendly and highly functional working environment. The chart on this slide illustrates the technology required to enable these end-user experiences to happen seamlessly. Let's take a real example in Uber. I believe that this company had the foresight to use technology to create a competitive edge, transforming the way that we book taxis today. Via the car service app, GPS is used to identify both your location and the closest vehicles to you. This spatial computing blends the physical world with the digital one, enabling you to get live updates on where your vehicle is, the dynamic pricing, and an estimated time of arrival. You're able to message the driver while they're driving to confirm your pickup point, and also receive text messages back of the vehicle, the driver's name, their photo, and their license plate. Finally, you're able to pay for the service online without the use of credit cards. Uber started building this experience when some of the capabilities they were imagining weren't fully supported by the 3G phones that their potential customers were using. However, they were so confident in that end-user experience that they had created, they knew that as consumers upgraded their devices, Uber would be first in market with this service, providing them with the competitive edge and hence securing the investment they needed to create the company. They did exactly the same for the food ordering and delivery service Uber Eats. And I believe this is a really important point to make as we're now gearing up for 5G and the implications for businesses are transformative. Again, I believe those that are first movers in this space will gain that competitive edge and reap the rewards. But why do I think that 5G will be so transformative? Well, just look at some of the scenarios outlined on this slide. Sticking with the car and transportation sector for a moment, the lack of latency that 5G brings makes autonomous transportation a reality. In fact, a number of Chinese delivery businesses used driverless vehicles during the pandemic to continue to provide a service whilst complying with the government isolation rules. This large-scale trialling is leading to an increased consumer acceptance for autonomous vehicles, removing those initial safety concerns. Now think about the implications of autonomous vehicles for Uber. And then from a personal vehicle ownership perspective, rather than us spending time driving the car, that time, that commute time in the vehicle would be free time to us, enabling us to choose what we do, transforming that driving experience further. In the health sector, Verizon has employed a number of robots during the pandemic to health centers in the US to carry out various tests, such as temperature and pulse checks, to those most critically ill patients, which then limits the amount of exposure that medical school staff need to have with the virus. And perhaps, as expected, in the sports, media and entertainment sector, we're starting to explore those opportunities that 5G can bring. This video clip is of Miami Stadium, which is connected with 5G. During this year's Super Bowl, there was over 21 terabytes of data going across Verizon's network during the game. It actually felt for the first time in history we were able to use this technology to enhance the in-game experience by delivering real-time augmented reality, which this gave the attendees of the game contextual data about the players on the field, the win probabilities, and further descriptions immediately following big moments such as a touchdown. This is a major advancement, bringing real-time adaptation of AR to the stadium. And yes, this is a US example, but we're taking these learnings and bringing them to football stadiums and businesses in Europe as we reimagine what events and conferences could and should look like. So to that point, here's a video on how 5G can reimagine how we collaborate at work across multiple locations.
My name is Jonathan Reeves, co-founder and CEO of Arvisio. Arvisio is a company focused on mixed reality experiences. Mixed reality is an important new technology that lies between augmented and virtual reality in terms of the spectrum. What it does is it allows you to bring in the real world and then overlay the real world with holographic images. It creates a whole new type of experience. An important aspect of mixed reality is to allow more than one users to see the same thing. So the ability for then multiple people to share the view and actually in real time make changes on the fly, annotate models, basically suggest alterations and enhancements, changes the game. But hitherto, there have been limitations on what you can do because of the limited bandwidth when operating in an untethered small. So with the Arvisio platform and in conjunction with Verizon's 5G technology, we're now able to extend this across multiple locations. So we can have a team in location A working on the design, extend that the connection across 5G, and now have a team at another location participating in the same design. We're now able to do things that just were not possible.
So what's next? Our future work study shows that organizations to invest more in digital and emerging technologies once this immediate economic impact of the crisis has passed. But solving technological challenges is only part of the picture. The pandemic has also sharpened customer and employee ethics. Even in the early stages of this global response to COVID-19, we were able to witness a dramatic reduction in traffic, in congestion, and pollution. While sadly, sustainability has not been a primary driver for businesses to date, being able to actually see the difference is like the final tipping point for employees and employers alike. Hence, businesses will need to have a look at their values in terms of their corporate social responsibility, or CSR, to ensure they meet the expectations of both employees and customers alike. What we need to keep front of mind is the fact that COVID-19 has been an accelerator of trends, not an originator. Therefore, lots of behaviours that we've seen emerging in the businesses were going to happen anyway. It's placing a spotlight on both businesses' strengths and their pain points. This provides us with the confidence that these trends are here to stay, and hence the need for business response. On perhaps a positive note, unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. It gives businesses permission to do things differently, to experiment, to test and learn in real time, providing a place and space for innovation and business transformation. Essentially, there are two key questions that need to be answered. The first is, how do you want to come back as a business at the end of the pandemic? And then secondly, you then work back to answer, what does this mean about the actions and decisions that you make right here today? Clarity in response to these two questions will ultimately define the path and the destiny that businesses take. So I want to end today on 3 observations that I have seen emerging from our body of work on this to date, that I'm going to leave, if you like, as guiding principles. And I'm pleased to say have been reflected in some of the panel discussions that we've had earlier today. The first is to be adept at adapting. The ability to rapidly deploy new technologies and the automation of a greater number of processes will be critical to competitiveness in this post-COVID world. We found one of the biggest barriers cited by business leaders to future readiness was the feelings of being constrained by legacy tech and working practices. Providing greater flexibility to employees and customers will create an environment of growth, opportunity, and build that long-term loyalty. Tied to this is the diversification of tools and practices through digital. Exploring how you digitize your business model and provide the ability to communicate, to measure, predict, and respond in new ways. I encourage businesses to ask themselves, not only are they future ready, but are they 5G ready? i.e., are you best placed to take advantage of the opportunities and capabilities that 5G brings? Focus on that innovation, optimizing that digital experience to support both your employee and customer needs to build that desire and increase value. And finally, perhaps most importantly of all, is show you care. There is a heightened awareness of ethical credentials, showing that organizational empathy, care for employees, the community, and the environment are increasingly viewed as being critical to a firm's competitiveness in that post-pandemic world by both employees and customers alike. Consumers are more aware and actively avoiding brands that do not align with their personal ethics today. The majority of firms report that initiatives around reducing environmental impact and giving back to communities have become more important within their organisation as a result of the crisis. And additionally, the skills that we considered less important in the first wave of the Future of Work study, such as emotional intelligence and ethical reasoning, are now seen in a different light and growing importance in the current field work. Firms will place a greater emphasis on fostering an empathetic and supportive culture following this crisis. In particular, we believe that there will be a greater focus on firms catering for the needs of the underprivileged and vulnerable customers. Corporate social responsibility, environmental sustainability, and workforce mobility have become more important to success of the firms and giving us an overarching strategy as a result of COVID-19. The crisis has brought a greater appreciation of the opportunity technology can enable. Remote working at scale has provided the ability to relocate employees to where their skills are most needed, to respond rapidly to new opportunities, to collaborate at speed and share ideas. It's likely that this gig economy will continue to grow as organisations try and increase their access to the right talent by considering a more diverse set of candidates. These business repivots will be swift. From the data that we've seen, we believe the majority of firms plan to change their structure in response to this crisis within the next year. So, in short, it's time for businesses to be brave, to be bold, to embrace the change, and to take the lead. Thank you for your attention.